Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and thank you for joining us today. My name is Maura Black. I'm joined by Mike Lestrito and Christine Clemens. The three of us are managing attorneys at Chisholm and Kilpatrick. Today, we're going to be discussing a question that is probably something that every single person dealing with a VA benefits case has thought of at least once. Why is my appeal taking so long to be decided? We're going to get into some specifics, at least that we know of, about VA wait times, and we're going to be discussing some things that could hold up an appeal or a claim. So we're hoping that this information that we have today is helpful to those of you who are in the process and are feeling as though it's taking forever for VA to decide a pending claim or appeal that you have. We're going to start by talking about some of the relevant appeal deadlines that apply to veterans. It is important to understand that the appeal deadlines for veterans and their representatives that govern how long you have to respond to a decision, those are different and not applicable to the VA. So we're going to start with appeal deadlines for those of you who are pursuing claims and appeals for VA benefits. And then we're going to get into some information that we have about why things are so backlogged at VA and hopefully shed some light, at least a little bit, on the situation. So just a brief overview. The length of time that it can take for VA to decide a claim or appeal can vary pretty significantly based on a number of factors. Veterans who file claims seeking service connection or an increased rating or benefits from multiple issues might wait longer for their claim or appeal to be decided. Sometimes more complex issues can take longer for VA to get to ultimately adjudicating them, especially if certain development needs to happen on the issue. And it also matters whether you are in the legacy system or in the AMA system or the modernized appeal system. Christine's going to get into that in a minute, just sort of what are the differences and how might they pertain to the wait times at VA. I kind of already referenced this. It is important to start by saying that deadlines for veterans and claimants are a critical component of the claims and appeal process at the VA. And it's really important for those pursuing benefits to understand which deadlines apply and govern their appeal choices. But it's also important to remember that VA does not have deadlines or even set timeframes that govern how long it takes them on their side to address a claim or an appeal. So in other words, the deadlines that veterans have to file an appeal, to submit a claim following an intent to file, to submit evidence within a certain evidentiary window, do not have a VA equivalent. You might think, why do I need to get my appeal in a certain amount of time, but yet VA can sit on my appeal forever? Unfortunately, the law is not written so as to require VA to address a claim or appeal within a certain amount of time. VA does have estimates and ballpark ranges that they provide. We're going to get into those later, but they're not beholden to the timeframes that veterans are. And further complicating things is the fact that veterans might have appeals in both systems, that is the legacy and the AMA systems. The wait times in legacy versus the wait times in the AMA are different. They also differ based on veteran-specific circumstances like age, illness, or financial hardship, depending on whether a case meets those parameters. And, with all of this, we might say this a couple of times, it is definitely okay to feel confused about where you're sitting in line, what time frames might be relevant to you. The system as it is, frankly, is just very confusing while VA is processing claims and appeals in both systems, legacy and AMA. And so it is okay to feel confused. It's very common. The system is very difficult to navigate. So again, we're hoping that today's information will at least shed a little bit of light on what you might expect if you're in the midst of this process. So, Christine, can you talk to us about the two types of, considerations that a person might have if they're pursuing an AMA issue versus a legacy issue?
Yeah, so basically, right now, it's a complicated time to have an appeal at VA because a veteran may have an appeal in one of two appeal systems. And then within the newer appeal system, AMA, as we're referring to it, there are multiple options. So I'm going to sort of go through what each of those is just to help clarify where someone's appeal might be and what their options are after that. So AMA is the modernized appeal system, and veterans have 1 year to file an appeal in that system. no matter what kind of decision they have 1 year to file the appeal. So in that respect, this new appeal system has sort of simplified the appeals process so that all of the appeal timeframes are the same, 1 year. And they can choose one of three lanes: the higher level review lane, the supplemental claim lane, or they can file an appeal to the board. We sometimes call it the notice of disagreement lane because that's what the appeal is called. But within that, there are three options. So just so that we're clear, not all of those options of where to appeal apply for each type of decision. So that's something that people need to be aware of. It's not just, you get a decision in one of the lanes and you can appeal in any of the lanes. There are specific choices. Veterans are limited in their choices depending on what kind of decision they have received. So upon receiving the decision of their first appeal in one of those three lanes, veterans can file a subsequent appeal. But if the decision is a higher level review decision, then that is unfavorable, the veteran or claimant wishes to appeal, then they have 1 year to either file a supplemental claim or a notice of disagreement, that notice of disagreement being an appeal to the Board of Veterans' Appeals. If the decision that they have is a supplemental claim rating decision, then and they wish to appeal that, the veteran or claimant can choose to file an appeal in the supplemental claim lane, in the higher level review lane, or they can file an appeal to the board. So all of the options are available to them if it's a supplemental claim rating decision. The same is true if it's the first time they've gotten a decision, that all of the lanes are open to them at that point. All of the lanes are open if it's a supplemental claim rating decision. If the decision that they have received is a board decision, then the veteran has a couple, or claimant has a couple of options. They can file a supplemental claim with new and relevant evidence within 1 year, or they can appeal to the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims within 120 days. Then, if they're at court and receive a court decision, a Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims decision that's unfavorable, they have 1 year to either file a supplemental claim, again with new and relevant evidence, or to file an appeal at the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, a higher court, within 60 days. So few different options depending on the type of decision that the claimant has received. That is, again, in the modernized appeal system, the AMA. That's one possible place where your case might be right now. The other appeal system is the legacy appeal system. This is the appeal system that we were trying to move away from and have been trying to move away from since it was officially implemented in February of 2019. But a lot of people are still in it. We'll get into that a little bit later. But just a little bit on the legacy system. This is the older appeal system. There's only one lane. It was a complicated process. It was a long process, but there's one lane. Your choices are more limited. So there are still some cases in that system that have been continuously appealed, and that was since before the AMA was put into effect. Some of them are waiting at the board. A lot of them are waiting at the board for hearings still. Some of them are at the board again after having been at the board and having been remanded by the board. Now they're back up at the board, still in that legacy appeal system. And if you have a pending legacy matter, the wait times at the board are likely a major concern of yours, largely in part because of how long you've already been waiting. But VA is currently working on appeals in both systems. Eventually, everything will move into AMA, but right now we're still in both of those systems. So one thing that I think is kind of worth mentioning is that CCK believes that the process in which VA is handling those appeals is needlessly delaying claims, appeals, decisions, and we have taken legal action against VA. We have talked about this in a number of videos if people want a frame of reference. So definitely check out those videos. But the long and short of it is they're making decisions in both systems. We don't like the way they're doing it, and they're not making enough decisions in both of those systems.
That's all helpful information, although I wish it weren't the case that we need to dedicate, so much time to educating folks out there who are in this process and who might not otherwise know or be familiar with how long it's taking, particularly for the board to get through decisions. So, Mike, I want to talk to you about the board delays first, because I would suspect that with how pronounced and significant the delays at the board are for both legacy and AMA claimants, I would bet that most out there who are experiencing a multi-year delay in getting a decision do have their case at the board. The wait times at the regional office are not as significantly long or really as distressing, frankly, as how long it's taking for the board to make decisions. But we also do want to talk about wait times at the regional office and why a person might be waiting longer than they feel comfortable waiting for a decision if they have a claim or appeal pending at the regional office. So first, Mike, can you talk to us about the board delays? And I do believe we have some figures that we're able to obtain from the board's appeal metrics that are available through VA's information on their website. But we want to start there because I think, as I said, the board delays are definitely a really significant issue at the top of the list for us.
Yeah, and that's right. And so anyone who's been advocating this area for any amount of time, or for veterans who have been living it for any amount of time, know that at the board there has always been the backlog. But at least in my experience, the backlog currently at the Board of Veterans Appeals is larger than any that I can remember. There currently is a massive backlog of appeals due to a number of different reasons, factors such as the COVID-19 pandemic, mailing delays, issues with C&P exams, and continued remands, backlogged hearings, which the board is making a priority, onboarding of new judges, and a number of other different factors that are really causing the current backlog at the board, I think, to be much greater than anything that I think we've seen, at least relatively recently. So in terms of the figures that Maura was mentioning, the information we have is that there are approximately more than 205,000 pending appeals at the board as of August 7th. Massive number. About a third of those appeals are in the legacy system, which Christine described, the older system, which VA is transitioning from. 2/3 of the pending appeals, though, are in the new AMA system. And as we'll talk about a little bit later, these are appeals that are in the new system that VA is not working as quickly as many of the appeals that have been sitting around for a long time, perhaps remanded a number of times, maybe going up to court, remanded again in the legacy system. And these numbers are really borne out in some of the actions VA has announced recently. The board has recently lowered its own production goals by about 15,000 decisions for this current fiscal year. We're waiting to see still whether the board actually meets that goal or whether they need to reduce it even further. It'll be interesting to see. But all that is to say that there's a massive, massive backlog of appeals pending at the board. And quite frankly, the board is just not working them fast enough, so they continue to build. In terms of the board's legacy docket, so these are cases that are pending in the legacy system, the old system, and have been docketed. So a VA-9 appeal has been submitted to perfect the appeal in the veteran's case, thus receiving a docket number. The board's legacy docket has essentially come to a standstill over the past few years. As it currently stands, the legacy docket decision date stands at September 2019. What does that mean? That means that cases, in theory, that have been docketed as of September 2019 or prior to September 2019 should be ripe for decision now or yesterday. But we're not really seeing that, and we haven't seen that September 2019 docket date. We haven't seen it move much at all. So at the board, recapping, there's a huge, massive appeals backlog pending in both AMA and in legacy, and we have not here at CCK seen a whole lot of progress, particularly for appeals pending in the new AMA system in the past year or two at least. In terms of the regional office, and Maura mentioned this a moment ago, we are not seeing the same sorts of delays that were the same sorts of massive delays, I should say, and backlogs at the regional office level that we are seeing at the board. That isn't to say that your appeal may not be taking longer than you'd like, or that your case has been kicking around for a long time and you've been waiting for a long time. VA has a projected timeline at the regional office of working these cases within 125 days to decide an appeal, but that number, doesn't really tell or capture the experience or the story of many veterans who have been waiting at the regional office with one of their appeals for maybe far greater than the 125 days. Higher level review appeals, so we're speaking now about AMA appeals in the new system. Higher level review appeals do seem to be being decided much more quickly than any other appeal that's pending at the regional office. These are appeals that can be submitted without any new evidence. In fact, veterans aren't allowed to submit new evidence with this form of appeal. These are reserved for situations where the veteran would like to appeal the decision based on the evidence that was previously a record at the time that the prior decision was made. Perhaps there's a legal error that they think was made, or there was a fact in the record that was overlooked. So these types of appeals are pending the shortest amount of time, essentially, at the regional office as of right now. Supplemental claim appeals, another type of appeal within the AMA system. These are taking a bit longer and I think are a little bit more unpredictable, just by the very nature of what a supplemental claim appeal actually is. So again, VA's stated goal is to decide supplemental claim appeals and higher level review appeals both within 125 days. The problem, though, is that when a veteran or a veteran's advocate submits a supplemental claim appeal, one of a number of different things can potentially happen to essentially delay or extend the time frame for a decision on that appeal. Things such as VA requesting private medical records, asking for former employees, or employers of the veteran to complete VA forms to show eligibility to benefits such as TDIU. Perhaps upon filing a supplemental claim appeal, VA orders a new VA examination, and the veteran has to wait for that to be scheduled, attend that examination, and then VA needs to decide the appeal. There are any number of different things that can happen within the supplemental claim lane that can mean that the veteran will receive a decision after the 125 days has expired. In terms of higher level review appeals, I was saying a second ago that veterans aren't allowed to submit new and relevant evidence, so these tend to be shorter appeals. That's true, but what can also happen with these sorts of appeals is that the regional office may look at the case and decide that there was an error in applying its duty to assist previously, and so they will defer the case to the supplemental claim lane, where VA does have a duty to assist the veteran by conducting additional evidentiary development, ordering an exam, or whatever the case may be, and that will then extend the case very likely at the regional office much greater than the 125-day deadline. So that's what we're seeing in the two lanes at the regional office. I will just note that in terms of remands, we are seeing that remands can take really anywhere between 2-3 months all the way up to a year, potentially even longer sometimes. It really varies very greatly, and a lot has to do with the type of development that needs to be done, the type of examinations, if any, that the veteran might need to attend. And so it is a little difficult to gauge, but typically we're seeing that decisions being issued following a remand do take a bit longer, certainly than if a veteran were to file a higher level review or supplemental claim appeal in the first instance.
I totally agree, Mike, with your point that it is just so variable in ways that we can't really understand, especially when it comes to the delays at the regional office. Those of you out there who have been pursuing claims and appeals at the regional office level, I've seen cases where we have basically filed the same type of appeal, or there's the same type of remand instruction that are happening in 2 different cases simultaneously. But for some inexplicable reason, one of those cases gets worked in a few weeks or a few months, and then the other is pending for 6+ months for the same exact type of development. I've seen cases that are very similarly situated timing-wise, where VA has asked for a director's opinion pertaining to a veteran's entitlement to a TDIU or unemployability benefits. And the director's opinion is one part of that process, depending on the veteran's rating. Not to get into that, that's a whole different video. But they request the director's opinion in 2 different cases on almost the same day, and one of them gets done in a few weeks, and the other takes a few months. So that can certainly be very frustrating. We definitely understand. It's very difficult to understand why VA is working on at this pace over here and at a different pace over there. I think a lot of that has to do with the way that the regional offices sort of load balance the work. And I know that they're trying to have things spread more evenly than they have in the past, so that one, slower regional office doesn't hold up every veteran's case that happens to be there. All of that said, those are helpful things, Mike, for people to keep in mind. If they are in the midst of development at the regional office, those items could be the reason why there's been a slowdown in getting a decision on a claim or appeal. We have some more information about, I believe specifically about the time that it's taking for remands to be worked and items to be worked at the board in terms of number of days. So Christine, based on what we know, and I believe the data that we have is mostly as of July of this year, can you talk to us about the wait times at the board and sort of after, depending on whether the case is in the legacy docket or in one of the AMA dockets?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a result of the ongoing backlog and the issues that Mike and Maura have identified, veterans are experiencing huge delays in receipt of their well-deserved, much-needed benefits. So those numbers as of July 2022, on average, original appeals in the legacy docket, in that older appeal system, are pending for 805 days from the date of certification. That's from the date that they kind of get to the board. They're sitting for 805 days. Returned legacy remands are pending for 387 days on average from returned receipt. So, you're looking at, even for those older cases where they've already been to the board and the board said something needed to be done, and that thing has been potentially completed, at least the regional office says that it's been completed, and now it's back at the board. Those cases are waiting for over a year. Appeals in the AMA dockets are pending anywhere from 375 to 578 days from when a notice of disagreement is filed, depending on the specific docket the veteran has chosen. Those dockets are the direct docket, where a veteran can't submit any evidence. They just say the record is what it is. The evidence docket and the hearing docket, just so that we're clear on those. And the time frames for each of those is different. It is also variable. VA had target numbers that they're frankly nowhere near close to meeting. Direct review, that direct docket is the shortest. Then the evidence docket is the second shortest, although second longest, depending on how you want to look at it. And the hearing docket has the longest wait. The average number of days that the board is taking to complete appeals will also vary greatly between the legacy and AMA, as well as within both systems. So you're seeing different numbers for each thing. You've identified, some cases seemingly get heard faster. At the board, it's supposed to be better regulated because they're supposed to be doing things in docket order. But as practitioners, we see cases that are decided that have no reason to be decided faster than others, but they are decided faster than others, where we maybe just filed an appeal, and other cases where we filed an appeal a year or two ago that still haven't been decided. And that's, again, in both systems. So the average number of days that the board is taking as of July 2022, original appeals and legacy take almost 1,200 days from certification to complete. while return, remands, and legacy only take 163 days. I say only, but that's still pretty long, especially when you tack that onto the amount of time that veterans and claimants have already been waiting. In the AMA system, the appeals in the direct review and evidence dockets take an average of 363 and 376 days to complete, respectively. I'm just going to say I think those numbers are skewed pretty substantially by the fact that the board is making decisions on cases that have been advanced on the docket. These are cases that are supposed to be given priority because of the age of the veteran or the specific circumstances, severe health or illness, financial hardship, including homelessness. So those numbers are skewed when we talk about averages. It's not really the average case or the average veteran's case or the average aged veteran. These are really exceptional cases. And even for those exceptional cases, there are delays of, you're looking at least a year. On the other hand, appeals in the hearing docket are taking an average of 692 days to complete. So more than, double the amount of time or almost double the amount of time. Pardon my math. Another important variation is I mentioned this advance on docket status. So if a claimant's case is advanced on the board's docket, the claimant can expect a decision from the board more quickly. Again, those numbers are skewed. Sometimes it's within a matter of months. Sometimes that 363, 376 is an average, which means there are numbers that far exceed that too, and those are for those cases that are advanced on the docket. So a lot of variables here. The averages, like I said, these are the numbers that we have that VA has reported. But unfortunately, what it means in reality is that a lot of people are waiting, and they don't meet the criteria at this time to have their cases advanced before the board.
That's a really important point that we have certainly talked about before, but I'm sure we have all fielded questions from veterans citing these metrics that are easy to find on the board's website. And they're saying things like, why is it that the number of days it takes to adjudicate an appeal like mine, let's say it's in the direct docket or the evidence docket in AMA, is this number, but I haven't gotten a decision in that number? Does that mean that I'm not the average case? It's not that the average is meant to represent the average case. It's a middle ground between the quicker turnaround time that we see for cases that are advanced, and then the ones that are not advanced are on the other end of the spectrum, unfortunately. So that's really, really helpful, Christine, for people to know that the numbers on the website are unfortunately watered down by the quicker turnaround time for the AOD status cases. So for those who are not advanced, I'm not exactly sure how these numbers help them or help to set expectations. In our experience, they're not expectation setting numbers. They're more like, based on all of the turnaround times, here's where the number is in the middle, which really doesn't help specific individuals who are waiting, whether they're advanced or not, on the board's docket, to try to understand, what does my wait time look like? So people out there might be wondering, what am I supposed to do? How long am I supposed to wait? How long is too long? If I'm exceeding the numbers, if my wait time is longer than the averages that are placed on VA's website, where can I turn? Is there anything that I can do? And so, Mike, is there anything that veterans can do to be able to check or monitor the status of their appeal while they are waiting?
I would say this is the most common question I'd say that I get from my veteran clients. When can I expect to get a decision? Where in the process is my appeal? Did it get lost someplace? To your point, my case is not taking the supposedly average amount of time. When am I going to get a decision? Admittedly, these are hard questions to answer sometimes. But I think veterans can do a few things and should do a few things to actively check the status of their appeal, particularly if they're not represented by an accredited agent or an attorney. the first thing is, NVA oftentimes directs them to this platform is check eBenefits. eBenefits is a program, a platform that allows veterans to very generally check the status of their appeal. I will caution, though, that in my experience, although it can be helpful in some circumstances, the information provided either lags or isn't always entirely accurate or lacks context. And so there can be some important information to take away from eBenefits and some of these other resources. I would just caution that, it doesn't always tell the whole story, and the numbers can quite honestly change day to day, minute to minute, even within these resources. Additionally, veterans can contact their local VA regional office and see if they can get any information from an individual working at the regional office. There's a VA national toll-free phone number, which is 800-827-1000. And, I have had some veterans that have been able to get some information, or, veterans that aren't represented particularly get some information from that resource. There's another website that veterans can log into, va.gov. There's a VA appeals tracker function within that website, which can provide some sort of guidance and insight as to where they are in the process. But like I said at the outset, I really would caution that oftentimes the information, if it is even available in these resources, may not tell the whole story and may still let veterans or leave veterans wondering exactly where they are in the process. Although, veterans can't necessarily speed up the appeals process per se, one thing that they can consider doing is looking into the criteria to advance their case on the docket at the board, or if they're at the regional office, they can make a motion or a request in writing or through somebody at the regional office to expedite their case based on different criteria, some involving advanced age, 85 and above at the regional office, 75 and above at the board, extreme financial hardship. Perhaps you have documentation that you may be going into foreclosure, or that you might be evicted, or even worse, you may be suffering or on the verge of suffering homelessness. Those are all things, in addition to some other factors, severe health-related issues or terminal illness. Those are all factors that you may be able to use to submit a request to the board or the regional office to have your case advanced. And if that is the case, then your case would be essentially moved up the ladder ahead of some other appeals that are pending. But absent those circumstances, there's not a whole lot veterans can do to speed up the appeals process, because as we said at the beginning, although we all have, veterans and veterans advocates have deadlines that we must meet, unfortunately, VA doesn't have, the same type of deadlines that they have to meet. So, as always, we encourage working with an accredited individual, representative, agent, who may have some, access to resources or knowledge to be able to move the process along more quickly. But otherwise, some of these resources that I just discussed can be, in context, helpful to get some additional information as to what's going on and how the process is playing out in your own appeal.
Great. And I echo Mike's point that if you are struggling to understand your options in the AMA, or if you have a legacy case and you have the opportunity to opt it into AMA, and you're feeling like the delays and the wait times are a factor that you need to consider in trying to understand what your next step should be and what your best options are, I would say that you're right. It is important to be considering how long it's taking for adjudications to be made at the board, whether you meet the advance on docket criteria or not. Those are things that are really relevant to how long you're really willing to sign up to wait for a decision from VA. So it's right to think about those things. It is important to use your resources. We have more information on this topic and other related topics on our website, cck-law.com. Also, as Mike said, never be afraid to ask for help from a VA rep, an accredited agent or attorney. This is complicated stuff for sure, and the wait times really only add to that. So good luck to all of you out there who are in the process. Hang in there. It's tough, but it's usually worth it at the end. And yeah, again, utilize the resources that we have on our website. We'll be keeping people informed as we have more information about delays and figures and things like that. And thank you so much for joining us today. Definitely follow us on social media and subscribe to our channel so that you can stay in the loop on these VA updates and other important ones. Thank you all again for joining us.